Time for rebuttals!
Glad to hear that I'm so popular.
It's 4-4. So we got 4-4-4 and 5 minutes for the rebuttals.
Alright.
You may begin.
So just to recap, I would like to remind the noble peanut gallery that this is a matter of civil rights, not states' rights. The federal government should step in when these rights should be guaranteed by the Constitution and yet have been oppressed for far too long by third parties. Sometimes the states have not been involved in this, sometimes they have. But again, it is this checkerboard of laws that are either for marriage equality or against it that has caused much varying opinion and a definite lack of unity between the states. We must stand together on this, because ultimately the people decide who controls the state and who controls the federal governments. And to deny them something so basic as marriage, that shows on us that we are some big brother in Washington or in any of the state capitals that is unwilling to listen to the voice of the people. States should vote for their own laws, and that is true. However, specific procedures should be implemented that allow marriage equality to be recognized nationwide. Ultimately, there will be marriage equality across all 50 United States. There's no question of that. Supporters of this have been incredibly outspoken and determined to ensure that their voices are heard. While many religious groups and certain states have been against it, once again, ultimately, civil rights should be the deciding factor in this issue, not bellyaching over states' rights. Thank you.
Okay, since these are shorter, I'm just going to let the video keep running. And did the government want any downtime?
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo! Confident.
Woo!
I'm going to hear from Canon Grainer of the government.
All right. Thank you. I'd like to thank the opposition for all they've said so far and their wonderful points. I want to thank you all for pounding the desks and cheering us on.
Yeah.
So some things that I want to go over. As the opposition spoke of a federal policy that would be implemented by the federal government, but then each state would be able to interpret it, I guess, was a little confusing. Comparing it to state laws that they can decide how fast speed limits are, to me, seems like the states could then determine whether or not they accept same-sex marriage or not, or any type of marriage, for that fact. So the federal policy, to me, what's the point? If it's going to be left to the states anyway, why does the federal government then need to take that time to go through that process to implement the federal policy?
Yeah.
Also, what was brought up is that this is a domestic issue, and so thinking about things that are outside of the country, such as terrorism, are things we shouldn't be working on. But if we think back to 9/11, terrorism became a domestic problem. If we don't deal with these important issues now, while they're outside of the country, sooner or later they will become a domestic problem. And like 9/11, many people's lives will be lost. Another point I wanted to bring up is that marriage equality is winning. Jaron brought that up. It will eventually become legal for all states to to recognize same-sex marriage. So leaving it to the states will truly represent the people and their voices. If we let it go to the federal government, to the Supreme Court, it's 9 people deciding the decision for everyone in the country. That's 9 people. So whose voices are being heard if we take it to the federal government? It's not mine, it's the federal government. It's not yours, it's the 9 people. The points that we brought up, I feel, are very strong points that should help you vote the right way. I want to propose a world to you now. I want you to think of a world where the states were able to make the decisions without the federal government stepping in and overruling them. The people in each individual state would be represented in a fair way. The federal government would have more time to focus on urgent matters, such as terrorism and the economy. There would be more safety and peace because of each part of the government is doing what they were meant to do within the powers that they were given. And most importantly, your voice as a citizen of the United States of America would be heard, and you would be able to make a difference. Thank you.
Okay, and the opposition has used their downtime, so we'll now hear from the leader of the opposition, the determined Morgan Key. Morgan! Yeah! Lady. Morgan. He's also fantastically dressed.
That's true.
Fantastically dressed.
I'm actually going to take this down.
Oh, sorry.
Because it's really awkward staring at myself.
I want to thank the government once again, or the House, for the points they made. I would like to first start off with the second point that they began with, which was about terrorism and how that became a domestic issue. With marriage equality is a domestic issue, but it is facing us, it's smacking us right in the face, basically. And if we are so focused on foreign affairs and foreign issues, such as terrorism, to the point where it does become a domestic issue, how can we possibly handle those issues when we can't even handle our own issues that are on our home front? The issue of marriage equality must be handled immediately. Otherwise, if we cannot take care of those issues, how are we possibly going to handle other issues that may come in our way? If we can't simply handle a matter of civil rights, how are we to handle the world's problems? And how are we to help and assist them? That being said, for it being a domestic issue, the voice of the people, like he said, must be heard. And at the federal level, and in which the Constitution states, the First Amendment says that we are given the freedom of speech. And if we are not having our voice heard at the federal level as well as at the state level, is that not going against the Constitution and what it states in the rights that it gives us there? So the voice of the people essentially must be heard in all ways and shapes and forms. And that doesn't necessarily mean at the state level. So they also said that the federal policy that we hit on, what's the point of it? Why does it matter? What's its purpose? The purpose of the federal policy is to ensure our rights. We believe within the opposition that by giving this right to the state level, it can potentially lead to our rights not being ensured. And by presenting this federal policy, we are allowing those rights to be ensured all the time. This policy, we intend on it giving the rights of the people and creating a format in which must be followed that ensures the right to marriage and marriage equality, but within the levels, like what levels is it determined? Is it allowing same-sex couples to be married in certain church institutions? Is it allowing, where is the line? Where are we drawing the line on marriage equality? There has to be some line, and the reason for this federal policy is to draw that line and to give that standard for the state government to allow for rights to be ensured. Overall, marriage equality must be recognized at the federal level in order to ensure those rights, to provide a process in which those rights that are given to us are ensured. The Constitution specifically set those out, and if we are not following the rights that are given by us in the Constitution, we're just like the people in the 1930s and 1940s who weren't giving those rights to African Americans at that time. We need to recognize the minority because just as in those times, African Americans were in fact the minority. The population rated at 9.8%, and if we aren't recognizing that minority, we aren't recognizing America as a whole, and we need to be unified as a
Woo! Okay. And we will.
Are we allowed to take any minutes or no?
Yeah, you have 5 minutes left. You haven't taken any, so you could take up to 5 minutes at this point.
You can take
Although, yeah, no, actually, we even have time if you wanted to take your full 5 minutes.
You'll just go, I'll put
Sure.
at 5 minutes, and then you can decide
And then
later.
we'll just tell you if we
Okay.
want to go.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 minutes!
Okay, so I will go ahead and stop this before then so we don't have just 5 minutes of random downtime on le video.